here forms the lower part of the nasal septum. Okay, vomer forms the lower part of the nasal septum. Now, this is the nasal septum. Okay, the partition inside the nose, nasal cavity. You tell me, if I ask you, is nasal septum, flexible or rigid? What do you think? Can you move like this, nasal septum? Can you? What do you think?
It's flexible.
Yeah, you can, right? Only the front part, back part you cannot. Okay? So part of it is cartilaginous. Cartilage is soft, okay? And part of it is bony. Cartilaginous part I can move, you see? But back part is what? Bony part. That is hard, I cannot move. Okay? So this is the cartilaginous part of the nasal septum, which is hyaline cartilage. Just know that cartilaginous part, the front. And the bony part is this part. Make sense? How many bones are there? Two different colors, right? Two bones form the bony part. You already know those two bones. You remember I talked about the ethmoid bone? Just try to think. Ethmoid bone has a middle portion and two lateral what? Lateral muscles, right? Remember that? In the middle portion, one part is extended upwards. Remember that? Crista galli. And I said another part is going what?
Down.
Down. That's the perpendicular plate. Do you remember that? So that perpendicular plate I mentioned at that time forms the upper part of the nasal septum. So upper part of nasal septum is formed by the perpendicular plate of ethmoid. Now makes sense, right? And the lower part is formed by plough-shaped bone, vomer. So these two bones, perpendicular plate coming from above and vomer from below, join to form the bony part of the nasal septum. So this is vomer, this is the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone. Okay. Now, sinuses, I have already mentioned a few times. Big sinuses are the maxillary sinuses. You have two maxillary bones, and the largest sinuses are what? Maxillary sinuses. I mentioned, right? Okay. You remember in the lateral masses there are air cells, many air cells. Those are also sinuses, but small. In the ethmoid bone, those are called the ethmoidal sinuses or air cells. In the frontal bone here, you have sinuses. Those are frontal sinuses. Make sense? Named after the bones. In which bone? You have sphenoidal sinuses inside the sphenoid bone. So you see, those are shown by different colors, different sinuses. Those are called paranasal sinuses too, because around the nose. Around the what? Nose. Paranasal sinuses. Make sense? Okay. Sinuses do what? Why we have sinuses? I mentioned one thing, that because of those sinuses, the head part of the body becomes light or heavy? It's light, right? Because not solid bone, right? You have cavities inside, so light. Number one. Number two, those sinuses are around your nasal cavity. When you produce sound, the resonance of sound is improved. The quality of sound is improved by those sinuses. You know, in sinusitis, or when you get cold, right? Fluid accumulates. The voice changes, right? The sound changes. You know that? Okay. So the quality of sinuses, quality of sound is improved by the presence of the sinuses around the nasal cavity. But they can cause problems too. Okay. So that is the skull, cranial bones and facial bones. Now, we'll go down. this guy, okay, this is called the hyoid bone. And hyoid bone is a lonely bone. It is called what? Lonely bone. Why it is called a lonely bone? Because nobody wants to take this bone as their part. Nobody wants to take him as their part. For example, when we talk about the cranial bones, facial bones, we didn't include him, right? We didn't. When we talk about the vertebral column, this is the vertebral column, you know that? We don't include him. When we talk about thoracic bones case, we don't include him. So nobody, no group, want to include him. Number one. Number two, this bone here in the front of the neck, upper part of the neck here, is not attached to the bone directly. It is like hung there by ligaments. Hanging by what? Ligaments. So it is not directly attached to any bone. So it's a lonely person, okay, lonely bone. Now, although it is a lonely bone, it has a very important function. What is that? You know, anterior neck muscles. There are many muscles here, right? These anterior neck muscles are supported by the hyoid bone, because that is the only bone here, right? So all those muscles getting what? Support. Supported by the hyoid bone. And these muscles are important muscles. For what? Swallowing, right? Mainly. So these muscles are supported by the hyoid bone. Also speech production, to move the tongue. Hyoid bone has a body and horns. Sphenoid bone has a body and 4 wings. Remember that? Butterfly shape. Hyoid bone has a body and 4 horns. 2 greater horns, 2 lesser horns. Horn-like structures, horns. So that's the hyoid. Now we will see the vertebral column or spine. This is the vertebral column. Okay? Vertebral column keeps your body what? Straight, right? Very important. As well as support your upper part of the body. What happens, the body weight from the upper part of your body goes down through the vertebral column. Make sense? So body weight is transmitted downwards through the vertebral column. Another important function is what? Which structure is located passing through it? A very important structure I mentioned a few minutes ago.
Spinal cord.
Spinal cord. Remember that? So those are 3 very important functions, right? Keep the body straight, transmit the weight from the upper part of the body to the lower part. Make sense? And protects the spinal cord. Okay? Makes sense, right? Okay. Now, the vertebral column is formed by a group of vertebrae. Uppermost part, this part in your neck, this area is called what? Anybody? Cervical area. Remember that? Cervical neck area is called cervical area. So these vertebrae are called what? Cervical vertebrae. Now if you don't know this area is called cervical area, that you have learned like 2 weeks ago, first lab, then it will be difficult. If you know this is called the cervical area, these bones are called what? Cervical vertebrae. How many you have? 7. Is it clear? So you have 7 cervical vertebrae here. Okay? If I ask you, the uppermost cervical vertebrae is attached to what? To the skull. Makes sense, right? So This is the uppermost vertebrae, cervical, and this is your skull, sitting on the uppermost cervical vertebrae. Okay? That's why this is called atlas. Okay? Anyway, so how many cervical? How many cervical?
7.
7. Then this part is called what? Thoracic, right? So you have 12 thoracic vertebrae here. It's a big part, right? 12. Then this part is called the lumbar part, lumbar area. So 5 lumbar vertebrae. So we got what? Cervical C1 to C7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thoracic T1 to what? How many?
12.
12. Lumbar, how many?
5.
5. L1 to L5. That's how we name, right? When you go to a doctor, the doctor will, if you have a problem in the back, will say you have some prolapse between L4, L5 or L2, L3, right? They'll use those terms. So that's how we count, okay? Okay. Then, after 5 lumbar, you have a large triangular bone here. This one. This is called the sacrum. Sacrum is a large what? Triangular shaped bone. Make sense?
Like a tail.
No, tail is different, okay? Sacrum is that big one. Big one is not tail. That's a large triangular. You see here, this one. And the tail bones here. Let's see the back. These are tail bones, Coxs. Okay? So let's go back. How many cervical?
7.
7. How many thoracic?
12.
How many lumbar?
5.
How many sacrum?
1.
1. Large triangular, right? And Coxs are tiny tail bones. 3 to 5 in number. The number varies. Okay? The tail bones, Coxs, number varies, not fixed.
Well, what is the function of the...
It is believed that human came from, yeah, and gradually the tail got short, right, through evolution, and that is the remnant, okay, remaining part.
Balance, but then as we balanced on our own, we didn't need the tail.
Right. Yeah. So evolution, when we say evolution, we don't talk about usually don't talk about 100 years. We talk about million years, slowly things change. That, yeah. Now, that's the vertebral column or spine, okay? Now, in very early part of life, if you see an infant, sacrum is not a bone. 5 pieces of bones, sacral bones, are separated, okay? And gradually they get fused to each other. So, in infants, instead of 1 sacrum, you'll see 5 pieces, make sense? And they get fused. So, you can see those lines here, transverse ridges. You see very clear lines, but they got fused, make sense? Okay. The vertebrae are, in between the vertebrae, you will see cartilaginous structures. See, these are the cartilaginous structures called intervertebral discs. Inter means in between, right? You say inter, in between vertebrae. So the disc, cartilaginous disc between vertebrae. Now, intervertebral disc, if you see an intervertebral disc, it has 2 parts. Okay, so this is the intervertebral disc. The outer part is like a ring. See, you can put your finger inside. It's like a ring, outer rim. That is called the annulus. Annulus means outer. annulus, ring shape, fibrosus. And inner part has soft gelatin-like structure. This is a soft part called nucleus pulposus. Annular is ring-shaped outer part. Make sense? Annulus what? Fibrosus. And inner part, you know, usually we say center part is the nucleus, right? So make sense. The nucleus pulposus, soft. Now if I ask you, which part is strong and protects? Which part is strong part? Annulus fibrosus or nucleus pulposus? Annulus fibrosus is strong because a lot of fibers inside. And remember, in your body, which structures you have more fibers, those structures are stronger. Make sense? Tough. Difficult to, torn. Make sense? Those structures have a lot of fibers. So outer part is very tough and the weight. Now you remember I said that vertebral column transmits the body weight from the upper part of the body, right? If you take a lot of things on your head or shoulder, a lot of weight is going through the vertebral column, right? To the legs. You see here, this is how the weight is transmitted. From the sacrum, goes to the hip bones and then to the leg. So now, yes?
Is that why, like, I just remember seeing, like, in more villages, if they're carrying heavy stuff, they hold it on their head.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if you put in the on the head, that's the center, right? That is one thing important. That if you put in the center, it's balanced. The weight is going. If you put in one side a lot, okay, all the time, then that will become a problem. Okay. So if you can take more weight, if you put in the center and in balanced way, that is important. Okay. So the weight will go in balanced way through the center, right? Now, you know that usually we say prolapse or fusion, whatever, of intervertebral disc. Where most of the cases people complain?
Lower back.
Lower back, right? Because as you go downwards, more weight is being given to the, so this part gets more weight than this part. This part is only carrying the head, right? This part is carrying more weight, right? And if you hold something like all the time you are carrying something, right? The more weight is going to lower part. Anyway, so you see that, that friction can gradually reduces the thickness of the intervertebral disc. It gets thin, okay? Sometimes when the bones come close to each other, bones have a tendency to do what? When you get fracture, bones do what? Again?
Forget each other.
Yeah, new bone tissue is formed, right? So when intervertebral discs are keeping them separated, so they don't come close to each other, right? But if it gets thin, then what will happen? The bones will come close to each other, right? Then new bone tissue will start to form, right? So that also happens. Anyway, so that's the intervertebral disc. Sometimes that intervertebral disc can slip away, slide out. Here, you see, in this side is normal. This side, part of it slipped backwards. Now the problem is, you see here, this is a problem. From the spinal cord, 31 pairs of spinal nerves come out like this, from both sides, like this. And when now you look here, this is the intervertebral disc, right? So if it slides backwards, gets out backwards, then will immediately behind it you have the spinal nerve, right? It will
It'll start hurting.
push the spinal nerve, hit the spinal nerve, make sense? And that will cause severe pain and numbness. Pain and numbness because pressure on the spinal nerve. Because spinal nerves are just behind the intervertebral disc, okay? So that is called slip disc or herniated disc. Herniated or slipped disc. Let me write down here. Okay, or slipped disc. Make sense? Okay. So let's stop here.